My name is Danielle Julian-Norton, and I teach sculpture here at the Columbus College of Art and Design. And I guess my personal interests are like unconventional and beyond kind of aesthetic, normal aesthetics. But I'm coming from a very sculptural artist agenda. But also in my practice, I'm interested in what is the role of the artist in the institution, or just the general role of the artist and educator. So I'm using the symposium as this kind of educational tool. And I guess the reason for this love isn't always on time is because everything that's happening in the art world constantly influencing how do we interject that into teaching? How do we introduce that into the classroom, because it's happening faster than, so how do we have a very contemporary conversation as it's actually happening? So I felt like the symposium, just like we're having today, is a really great format to make friendships, have connections, and also like here kind of demystify actually what's happening in the real world and bring it into the classroom and have very informal conversations on those topics. And also hear from visiting artists who are very successful, and it demystifies that for the student and also the educator, the community. So I guess that's the agenda of Sculpture X, which is kind of the symposium that we've hosted for the last 2 years. And what Sculpture X is it's a teaching and networking and a platform for artists to come together and to collaborate and to build these kind of friendships and conversations. And it started with It started with the Sculpture Center in Edinburgh University, and the Sculpture Center, which also has to do with this like friendship-based relationship between the Sculpture Center and myself and our students. And it also is a very Midwest program. So it's like connecting all these Midwest schools, regional schools, and put them on a platform of more of a national and international conversation, and then dealing with contemporary ideas that are happening in sculpture. So I guess how this started was in the sculpture department in Edinburgh University had contacted the Sculpture Center. And actually this is the 4th year that this symposium has happened. And every year the symposium gets passed on to a different university. And we hosted it actually for 2 years, and then it gets passed on next year to Wayne State University. But it's, I think, a really nice kind of model for how all these like relationships can build. So when we took on this project, it was thinking about all the things that influence art and how to insert those into the conversation of contemporary sculpture and teaching. And myself personally, I was like influenced by, thinking of myself as an artist and a teacher, influenced by the art market, the institution, like the conversations that were happening now and like what's affecting culture, what's affecting making. And what I had noticed going into the first Sculpture X Symposium was this kind of shift from the culture section. When I was reading art reviews, it was shifted from the culture section of the newspaper to the entertainment section of the newspaper, and also this like shift in popularity of celebrity culture. And so I started looking at how that's affected my students, how that's affected the artists that I'm looking at, and who's teaching where and what's going on. it was this more very spectacular kind of everything, art making, programming. So the first Sculpture X was a symposium that was based on the performative object and everyday spectacular. And it was about objects which I had been noticing in sculpture, because sculpture, as I'm teaching it, I have to house everything. So since sculpture left the pedestal, I feel like I have to house performance, video. I have students coming at me with everything that's in space. And so trying to deal with those dilemmas. And also, I noticed like at PS1, there was like everything was talking to me and everything was very interactive. And so it was like these objects are not just allowed to be objects anymore. They have to actually, I have to interact with these objects. Like it's just a different kind of object. And it's like an entertaining object. And so this Everyday Spectacular symposium was inserted into the conversation of the classroom and the students, the community. And so, I mean, here at CCAD, I incorporated everybody. So I wanted to hear from the art educator, the institution. I wanted to hear from the museum. I wanted to hear from the artist, the curator, the critic. So like getting all of those people in the same room to have a conversation and, you know, hear directly from them how they feel about these ideas, which I guess is a typical thing to do. And so these are the schools that were involved first. Whoops, yes. So these are the schools that I had just, one had kind of friendships with, and then was able to call and had kind of conversations about this subject with them, and kind of talking about what are the current states of sculpture. So I was able to really hash out, like, what do you think about sculpture? Here's what I think, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm reading. And then contact them and then have them, like, really kind of have a tiny roundtable discussion about it, but then open it up to a larger audience. And what I think is important about this symposium, that it was very informal. So it's not someone at a podium necessarily, but it's like this going out to dinner, students mingling with the artist, and those very informal conversations that seem more powerful than a very formal, dry conversation, presentation style. So Martin Purcell's actually was like, so he came in from Yale and was, I mean, it was like a kind of immediate person to contact, because he seemed to be leading in this direction in terms of making and education and producing artists who were having an impact in the art world. So, and he gave this very, on this stage, very vulnerable, interesting conversation about art that had to do with history of art and artists as artists. So artists not coming up here pretending to be anything else but artist, which I also think was really important. Right before the discussion, he said to me, you know, I asked Robert Storr how to direct a symposium. He said, the best thing an artist can do to direct a symposium is just be an artist and not pretend to be anybody else. And so I thought that was really interesting and fantastic, actually, and informative. So he gave us like very fantastic spectacle, performative, performing as an artist on stage. And we also had Michael Murcell, Osman Khan, Yumna Shala, and Cheeto Johnson. And so it was from Pratt, University of Michigan, Ohio State, and College of Creative Studies here in a discussion. And they had backgrounds from all over the, I mean, even though they were teaching at institutions, what I found interesting about them is that they were making interactive objects and incorporating into their art practice in multiple ways, but they also came from very completely different backgrounds. So this kind of incorporation of that into sculpture. And then also Terry Smith, who was an art historian, art critic, talking about not just art in the United States, but art on a global. And then Lillian Fiedler from Switzerland, who gave a performance on the object, but she's coming from a standpoint of a musician. So it's this genre jump of music into form, which I thought was really interesting, and like how music has taken a form, and like her performance, sculpture, space. And she was also at Goldsmith University. She was now at Goldsmith University. So I was interested in like this kind of other perspective in terms of outside of the United States coming into this conversation. And there was also an exhibition. There was an exhibition in the Kanzani Gallery, and then we also had the Love Library, which is, I know there's people from College of Creative Studies in here, which is Cheeto Johnson from the College of Creative Studies in Sculpture, and he had curated this Love Library, which artists, it's very community-based and networking in itself, in terms of every artist made a book based on the subject of love, and it was incorporated in the library, and so you could go in the library and sit down and actually look at an artist object and read about their idea of love. And then the Sculpture Symposium of 2014, I feel like I'm probably running out of time. What does 152 mean? Okay. So the Sculpture Symposium 2014 was based on myself, I mean, this is the second year of hosting it, going to University of Chicago for a symposium, going to LA for a symposium, and those conversations of what was happening in those different conversations. So at the University of Chicago, I went to Three Walls, and they were having this symposium on race, class, and gender, and then going to Los Angeles, and this Isabella Gra was talking about how consumerism has directly affected the art making, and specifically the mannequin, and this like fetishized object of the mannequin. And I saw this really strange connection between the two, between going from conference to conference. It was like this race, class, gender kind of suppression, and then also this like commercial identity in the mannequin and its super polishedness. And so it seemed very clear that, and also just listening to the contemporary world and my inner rage, I felt like there was this need for this conversation about the social political object. And so it kind of grew into the second year. We had, these are the schools that were involved, the presenters. And this was just by calling these schools, I don't know why it's doing that, calling these schools and then, I don't know, whoops. Calling these schools and asking them to participate. And these are the schools that ended up participating in Sculpture X 2 here at the Columbus College of Art and Design, in terms of who were the presenters. And then we also had a student presentation both years where students could also engage. So it was like this really nice relationship between students, faculty, artists, and the students could use it as a networking tool to talk about their work and engage with presenting their work and each other. And it was very regional, but also had like national components, but also talking to artists who were relating in the field. I'm an artist, I'm not a PowerPoint person. So this is our artists these are the student artists who were participating in this symposium, and they kind of had this conversation amongst themselves in the audience, which was a nice component. So then for the everyday, or for the social political object, we had Sharon Hayes as a guest speaker, and who kind of led the keynote. And then Susan Richmond, who is was kind of relating, and actually Sharon Hayes did this really wonderful performance to kind of start the conversation, and then Susan Richmond, who did this kind of compare and contrast between male and female aesthetics throughout history. And then this very, very smart Women on the Rise symposium that had to deal with, I think, finding a new form for sculpture, and actually a new form where they were going into the prison system and talking to females who and incorporating art into their lives. And what was really interesting about this presentation, it was their journal entries, and they read it, and it was very authentic, and they weren't taking ownership of it, and they weren't exploiting it, and they weren't. It was just very, very authentic about the process of that, and it was just like very interesting social practice that was. It wasn't commercializing it, it was just about that process, and I felt like it was just a very, very smart form in terms of just this reading based on their journal entries. So going back and forth about their practices. So I thought I was interested in this as like this kind of, I liked that as a form. And so they were obviously interested in race, gender, and sexual embodiment. So some images from their presentation. And then also Eliza Marie, who was interested in class, ethnicity, and politics, had also presented, and then also Mitchell Squire, who's from the University of Iowa. And then also just like the outcomes of it, which is this very personal connections that students can have with artists, very informal conversations that I felt were of significance for the students, myself, the faculty, the community. So that's it. Thank you.